Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about Tyreek Hill, wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs, and the information that came out yesterday that he will not be facing a suspension by the NFL in the 2019 season. Majority of this entire offseason has been us speculating on how many games he's potentially going to miss and how that's going to affect him in his fantasy value. But now that we've been given this confirmation, I wanted to go ahead and talk about where I have him ranked and how his return to the Kansas City Chiefs offense helps the entire offense as a whole and what we can expect to see of this offense. So before we begin today's video, I want to go ahead and remind everybody, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button, join the community. As the weeks progress, as we get more and more closer to the 2019 fantasy football season and the NFL season, can't wait. I'm so excited. I will be bringing out more and more content. As of right now, we're sitting at about 2 to 3 videos a week. It'll continue to increase 4 or 5 until the regular season starts, which I expect to do about 7 videos, pretty much once a day, perhaps even more. It depends on how much viewership I get. But for those of you who have already subscribed, thank you again for the support. Click that notification bell to know when my live streams are beginning and when my latest video is out. So thank you again for the support, guys. Hey, everybody. Okay, so we're talking Tyreek Hill. We're talking the Kansas City Chiefs. It's pretty much a surprise, but I'm not going to be talking about the allegations or anything. I just want to talk purely fantasy football and how this specifically affects the Kansas City Chiefs and potentially your fantasy leagues because of how good Tyreek Hill was last season. A lot of us haven't been talking about Tyreek Hill because of the fact that we 100% thought he was going to be suspended for 4 to 8 games. It kind of jumped around this offseason. But let's talk about what Tyreek Hill was able to do last season. What an incredible season he had in 2018. Obviously, with the help of Patrick Mahomes throwing those 50 touchdowns and 5,000 passing yards, it made a difference. But Tyreek Hill last season had 137 targets, 87 receptions for 1,479 receiving yards, 17 yards per reception average, which is unbelievable. 12 receiving touchdowns, 151 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and 1 punt return for touchdowns. So, this guy does it on pretty much every possible offensive asset or facet. He moves around the formation. You can use him in the backfield. Special teams, he's been successful throughout his entire career. He's unbelievable. Last season in half-point PPR scoring formats, the guy had 290.5 fantasy points, which was number 1 amongst all wide receivers in half PPR. In a standard league, he was the number 1 wide receiver by a wide margin. In full PPR, he was the number 3 wide receiver, but not too far behind Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins. I think he was about 4 or 5 points from being the number 1 in a full PPR, even with 87 receptions, which is far less than the competition comparatively. In half PPR, he was only 0.1 points behind Ezekiel Elliott, which is pretty ridiculous considering just kind of how valuable this kind of a receiver is. He would have been the number 6 running back last season, or number 5, 0.1 points away from Ezekiel Elliott's total. Fantasy points per game, he had 18.16 last season. This guy is unbelievable. But here's the thing about Tyreek Hill. Before I praise him, I just praised him for a good amount of time. I have to talk about the reality of Tyreek Hill and what he kind of brings to your team. Obviously, you're going to get one of the best fantasy wide receivers, but you have to understand just how volatile he is as a wide receiver before you go ahead and draft him wherever you do. Okay. Specifically, last season, Tyreek Hill had 7 games in which he was a wide receiver 1. Wide receiver 1 meaning that he was in the top 12 wide receivers by the end of the week in half PPR. And in 4 of those weeks, he was the number 1 overall wide receiver. So when he had big games, he was incredible, right? And, majority of the time, 7 out of his 16 games, he was a wide receiver 1. So he's been consistent, and he's had a pretty good pace. But the inconsistency and the volatility comes from when Tyreek Hill is not having those big games. In the 8 weeks in which Tyreek Hill was incredible, in which he was scoring touchdowns and had, 100 plus receiving yards, and he was a focal point of the offense, the guy was amazing. There was 8 weeks. It was weeks 1, 2, 6, 7, 10, 11, 14, 17. So you see how that's kind of gapped a little bit. In those 8 specific weeks, he scored 221.4 fantasy points. He scored all 14 of his touchdowns in those 8 weeks, and he had a 27.67 fantasy point per game average in those 8 weeks. Now, In the other 8 weeks, where Tyreek Hill did not score a single touchdown, where he wasn't a 100% focal point of the Kansas City Chiefs offense, the guy scored on average 8.64 fantasy points per game. Total was 69.1 total fantasy points in that 8-week gap, where it was weeks 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 13, 15, and 16. So again, you have to understand that there's a wide volatility with Tyreek Hill. You have to understand what you're getting. When you draft a guy like Tyreek Hill, understand that half the weeks during the season, he's going to be amazing. He is going to literally perhaps win you the week. And then on the other side, on the flip side, where it can be just random, he's going to lose you a week or 2 or maybe even 8, and potentially you can miss your playoffs. It happens. Think about it. Prior to getting to your playoffs in week 13, you have a 12-week gap. You need a majority of those games, those 12 games, you need at least 7 of those games where Tyreek Hill pops off and has wide receiver 1 performances, because his downside is awful. There were weeks in which he was a wide receiver 4. He was scoring 4 or 5 fantasy points per. I think there was a gap in which he, in a 5-week period, he had a couple great wide receiver 1 performances. But then the rest of the weeks, the 3 other weeks, he was a wide receiver 3 with 4 or 5 fantasy points on average there. So there is a wide volatility with Tyreek Hill. So understand what you are investing in when you draft a guy like this. Okay. On top of it, we know Tyreek Hill's entire MO is being a deep threat. And with Patrick Mahomes' arm strength, it's the perfect combination for this offense. Last season, he led all wide receivers with 27 receptions of 20-plus receiving yards. I mean, it's nothing that we shouldn't expect. We've seen it in the past, even with Alex Smith. But it was just increased. They dialed it to 11 this past season, and I expect that to continue. I don't see the Kansas City Chiefs slowing down, and I don't see the production of Tyreek Hill slowing down. But fantasy-wise, we have to understand what we're getting ourselves into. So let's get to where I value him in our upcoming drafts. Now that we know for certain, I mean, you never know. There could be a fine that comes out, maybe, but as of right now, there's no suspension looming. As of right now, I personally have him ranked a little bit differently depending on the scoring format. In a standard league, he's my number 1 wide receiver, without a doubt in my mind. The fact that it only takes 1 play for this guy to have 70 yards and a touchdown under his belt, I mean, it's incredible, and he does it very often. Now, the only concern I ever have with a guy like Tyreek Hill is those games in which he doesn't have that touchdown. But again, that's just the risk you're willing to take. In a half-point PPR, as of right now, I have him as my number 3 wide receiver overall, behind DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams. As of right now, I understand the upside of Tyreek Hill, but I do not like the volatility of him potentially giving me a crap week on back-to-back weeks and really hurting my season. If in that 12-week gap before you get to your fantasy playoffs, he doesn't have at least 50% or more games in which he is just balling out and winning you the week, then what is he really doing for you? He's more or less hurting you in those weeks which you really need him to perform. He doesn't show up, and then you lose the week. That can be a little risky at times. So in a half-point PPR, he's my number 3. In a full-point PPR, it's safe to say I'd probably have him as my number 3 or 4. So as of right now, he's still a top 3 wide receiver, no matter the scoring format. And that's where he's going to be. As long as you're attached or associated with this Kansas City Chiefs offense, you're going to be fantastic. Whether you're Travis Kelce, you're Tyreek Hill, Damian Williams, perhaps if Sammy Watkins decides to stay healthy, I mean, they're going to be great. This offense is just so dynamic, and they have so many pieces, and they're extremely young at their core. So they're going to continue to get better. They've improved their defense. Therefore, they'll get Patrick Mahomes back on the field. They don't have to have those, 5-minute drives in which their defense is just getting beat up, and then eventually Patrick Mahomes gets on the field. No, 3 and outs, get him the ball. More fantasy points are associated with that. Now, what else can I mention about Tyreek Hill? As of right now, draft-wise, he could probably come off the board in the late first round, and I would not be surprised, especially in a half-point PPR. I know a lot of us have already conducted drafts. I've seen him prior to the information that came out, go in the 4th round. I've seen him go in the 8th, in the 9th. If you've already drafted and you have Tyreek Hill, well, congratulations. You have a fantastic receiver, and you must have gotten him at a very great discount. So that's fantastic in itself. But as of right now, looking at Tyreek Hill's value, he's going to be a top 3 wide receiver. I don't see him anything else. I understand he's not even the number 1 wide receiver on his own team. I mean, looking at the amount of targets, he had 13 less targets than Travis Kelce last season. He had about 16 less receptions than Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is the number 1 wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs. There's no doubt about that. The only difference is Travis Kelce is not going to have a 70-yard touchdown that makes his week. Travis Kelce is going to have to, he's going to have to see those targets. He's going to have to see some progressive gains here and there. He's not going to have a one play and it's over, or on a special teams play, he can go and score and make his week with a touchdown there. So obviously there's a little bit of a difference between those two. But Travis Kelce going into 2019, I mean, I don't see how, technically I could see where his value gets a little bit more diminished, because if in fact Tyreek Hill had been suspended for like 8 weeks, Travis Kelce would have seen even more targets. And in that 8-week gap, Travis Kelce would have been incredible, right? He would have saw, upwards of 12 targets a week, and then that would have made him perhaps one of the best receivers in the entire NFL fantasy-wise. So I can see how it kind of hurts him. But then again, Travis Kelce is still far and away, in my opinion, my number 1 tight end. Even with Tyreek Hill coming back, makes no difference. Sammy Watkins, on the other hand, if he stays healthy, he can figure it out. Damian Williams does not get hurt by this. If anything, it helps because of the fact that there is a wide receiver on this team that has a 4.4 40 that is going to beat the safeties in the back, and you have to have a cover 3 to at least help with the coverage of Tyreek Hill. It opens up more so where they don't stack the box. They can open it up a little bit more. Damian Williams can find some gaps here and there. The only person I see this hurting as of right now is Mecole Hardman, wide receiver rookie that they drafted. I mean, obviously, he's been typecast as sort of the replacement to Tyreek Hill as of right now, as long as Tyreek Hill plays. Mecole Hardman's like, a number 3, number 4 receiver on their respective team. Sure, he can learn and eventually pick up the pace, but we'll see. The only other information that I was made, kind of aware of this morning, especially, was that there was a report going around that Tyreek Hill might be traded in the coming weeks. Now, whether that is true or whether that's another rumor, I don't know the validity of it. But as of right now, I'm just going to go ahead and say I doubt they trade him. With the swiftness that the Kansas City Chiefs got rid of Kareem Hunt, right? As soon as that video leaked, boom, he was gone. No more sign of him. The packing trucks, the moving trucks got him out of Kansas City immediately. The fact that the Kansas City Chiefs stood by Tyreek Hill throughout this entire situation leads me to believe that they had a lot of trust in him, and they believed him, and they backed him pretty much. So I don't believe that through this entire situation, now that they've stuck by him through this entire thing, now that he is not being suspended, he has not been charged with anything, I doubt that he's going to be traded in the coming weeks. I 100% don't see that being the case. If it does, then I'll be proven wrong. But until then, I have a pretty good sense of Tyreek Hill just being, just picking up just where he left off. And the Kansas City Chiefs offense picking up where they left off. So those are my thoughts. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, hit me up down in the comment section. If you haven't already, click that like button. If you haven't already and you like the content, click that subscribe button. I got a lot of more videos coming your guys' way. Just wanted to give you my thought process on Tyreek Hill. Again, I expect him to be a top 3 wide receiver. As long as Patrick Mahomes is throwing you the ball and you can get behind safeties and cornerbacks, which he damn well can, better than any receiver in the league right now, you're just going to be extremely fantasy relevant, and that's where I expect him to see, or I expect him to be this coming season. Before I close out this video, couple more, nuggets of information regarding the draft kit that is going to come out in the coming weeks, probably late July, early August. No exact date as of right now. Last week I mentioned it in my video, or earlier this week, in the Chris Carson and Mark Ingram video, I mentioned it. 130 plus player profiles. Also forgot to mention that I will be having in this draft kit, it will have rankings for every scoring format. So my top rankings on standard, half PPR, full PPR, per position by tier. Also flex rankings before the season starts. So just kind of give you that information. But again, I will have a video in the coming weeks talking about the entire draft kit as a whole with examples of players, player specific profiles and stuff like that. But anyway, thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Have a nice weekend. See you.